to write a text for the Geshes. And he turned around and said to me, well, first we should write a longer text and then make an abbreviated short text. And then he gave me a transcript of some of his teachings. He gave me instructions and he sent me off. And I've been hearing His Holiness's teachings for quite a number of years. So I have notes. I know what texts he has taught before, and attended many of his talks. And so I started putting things together. And then over the years, I was able to have a series of interviews with him, because if we're going to have topics in here that address the needs of non-Tibetans and non-Buddhists who are starting the path, then I had to ask him some questions, the kinds of questions that Tibetans never ask. Okay. And so over the years, then I had appointments with His Holiness, and recorded them, transcribed them, included them in the manuscript. And it's very hard to get appointments with His Holiness, so it was often many years between them. And I would keep writing, and so the manuscript just got bigger and bigger. And then one year he said, oh, this book has to be, this series has to be unique. It can't be just repeating the usual stages of the path again. So he said, I want you to include information about Theravada Buddhism, the Pali tradition, and Chinese Buddhism, okay? Because we need to be 21st century Buddhists, we need to have a very big mind and learn from the other traditions and appreciate the other Buddhist traditions. So then he sent me off with a letter, and I spent some time in Thailand at a monastery studying with one Ajahn there. And then I've always had a close connection to Chinese Buddhism, so I began to learn more about that as well, and put that in the book. And so it became larger and larger and larger. And then, over 2,000 pages of manuscript, that's how big it became. And then His Holiness said what he wanted was a volume that talked about the similarities and differences between the different Buddhist traditions. And so that wound up being the book, Buddhism, One Teacher, Many Traditions. And we launched that book 2 years ago, wasn't it? Maybe 3 years ago. So that's, if you really want to learn about the different Buddhist traditions, it's a very, very helpful book because it goes into the philosophy and the teachings. It doesn't just deal with superficial things like all Buddhists bow down and, stuff like that. It really talks about the Buddhist doctrine. So after that book came out, then I still had 2,000 pages of manuscript, so I started putting together this series called the Library of Wisdom and Compassion. So, the first volume of that is called Approaching the Buddhist Path. And so this volume is primarily an introductory volume with a lot of the information and teachings that we need before we even start practicing the path, things we need to understand about Buddhism before we start to practice. And also, so it's not necessarily easy things. Sometimes we think setting the foundation is you talk about easy topics and then go into more difficult topics. Actually, His Holiness, the Dalai Lama's way of teaching is he starts out with the two truths, the four truths, all this philosophy right away. You know, he doesn't just start out with something easy. He really gives you the essence of it. And he says that he does that because he knows that modern people are educated and they want to learn. They want to think about the teachings and understand them. And His Holiness himself always emphasizes understanding, looking at the teachings using reasoning, using logic, not just faith-based approach. And he says this over and over and over. And I think that's because sometimes he sees in the Tibetan community itself and in other Buddhist countries, sometimes people are just, they just have faith in the Buddha. And they say, I believe because the Buddha said so. And he says, if your trust in the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, if your refuge is based just on faith, that I trust it because the Buddha said so, then if somebody asks you a question and asks you to explain something, you won't be able to do it because you haven't sat down and really thought about it, you know, and understood the reasoning behind things. So that's why he just, you know, starts out with some difficult passages. So I want to read some things. So in this first volume, he starts off by talking about the purpose of existence and the meaning of life. That's the chapter 1. So you see he's diving into it from the very beginning. And then he also places Buddhism, he locates it within, how does it relate to science? How does it relate to other religions? Okay, so we get an idea of how Buddhism fits in there. And then he goes into the Buddhist view of life. So what is the mind? The mind, the body, rebirth, okay? The four truths of the Aryas, dependent, arising, and emptiness. Nice, simple topics, huh? He just hands it to us right there, okay? And the possibility of attaining liberation, too. Because he says these things are really important to understand at the beginning. You know, what is liberation? How do we know it's possible to attain liberation? Because if we don't have some conviction in that, then why are we practicing the path? Yeah, if we're not sure the outcome is feasible, then we won't have much energy in the practice itself. Then he goes into the mind and emotions and talks about the Western, or I should say the modern scientific view of emotions and the Buddhist view. So that's quite an interesting chapter. Then we talk about the spread of the Buddha Dharma and Buddhist canons and the Buddhist teachings, how they form a cohesive whole, how there are many different Buddhist traditions, but they're based on the same premises. And the fact that there's different traditions indicates that the Buddha is a very skillful teacher, and he expressed the meaning in different ways for different people, because people have different interests, different dispositions, different likes and dislikes. So he knew even within the Dharma, he couldn't just teach one thing and assume it's going to be suitable for everybody. So he taught different things sometimes, or he expressed the same thing in different ways. And then gradually different Buddhist traditions grew up because the Buddhist followers spread out in the 10 directions, and they taught in many different countries. And according to the culture of the country, the political situation, the economic situation, the history of the country, then Buddhism would be expressed differently in these different cultures. Okay? Because the Dharma never exists independent of culture, because human beings don't exist independent of culture. Okay? And so the fact that the Buddha could address all sorts of different kinds of people in a way that made sense to them is really a tribute to his greatness as a teacher. And I can say that in my the study I had to do to, edit these books, I learned so much about the different Buddhist traditions, and it really increased my respect for the Buddha as a teacher. Then he goes into the importance of kindness and compassion, which is one of his favorite things. And he also talks about investigating the teachings. And then he goes into a systematic approach, talking about the different ways of presenting the teachings and tools for the path, different kinds of things we need to understand, like what is merit? We always hear about collecting merit. What in the world does that mean? Okay. He talks about making progress. How do we gauge our progress on the path? And then in one chapter, he shares his personal reflections about Buddhism and how he practices, how his days go. I think that's quite a special chapter. And then he, in the last chapter, he talks about working in the world, how Buddhism relates to the arts, to science, to the media, to consumerism, to climate change and the environment. Okay? So this, I think, is also a very precious chapter, because we really see that Buddhism isn't just a religion with some kind of philosophy. It's a practice and a way of life, and and it affects every aspect of our life. Okay, so when we're Dharma practitioners, we can't just keep our Dharma practice over here with a fence around it, and our life over here and living in a completely different way. Okay, so it isn't like you go to Dharma class on Sunday morning and you're very virtuous, and then the rest of the week you cheat people in your business, you lie to your family, you're mean to other people. No, okay? The Dharma has to permeate our whole life and every aspect of it. When I relate it to things, I often talk about social issues. Things that are coming up in society that people are thinking about, because we get a lot of emails from people, especially since, we live in the US, and since the election in 2016, we get emails from people saying, how do we maintain our sanity, with what is happening in the country and what is going on? So we have to talk and relate these things to people's lives at this particular historical time. We can't just, talk about the Dharma as some kind of ethereal idea, but it has to remain something that is a guiding force that helps us keep a peaceful mind in troubled times, that helps us make wise decisions, not only on an individual level, but on a group level and a social level. How do we relate to climate change? Yeah, do we just say, well, this planet goes out of existence and we can be reborn on some other planet, so it doesn't matter? Is that what we say? Or do we realize, hey, there's sentient beings born on this planet, and they are influenced by the state of their environment. And if we have pollution, if we keep on using too many of the world's resources, if we have a lot of waste that is not recycled, such as styrofoam, boxes from juice, boxes from all your takeout things, plastic. How many of you recycle? Oh, good. That's better than before, So we really have to recycle. We also have to cut down on our consumption. How many of you cut down on your consumption? Fewer people. Yeah? Well, what's hard about cutting down on our consumption is advertising. Advertising shows us all these beautiful things. Then craving arises. Oh, I want this, I want that, I want the other thing. Yes, I know that I'm using a lot of resources from the earth, but I'm just one person, so if I use it, it's not going to make much difference. Okay? So this is the kind of questioning that we use and checking up on our own behavior that we need to do when we really take the Buddhist teachings to heart. So I thought to read you a little bit from this volume. Let's see here. Okay. How about the importance of motivation? I just choose things randomly when I want to read. So I think it's, yeah. Okay, so this is a subsection in the importance of the chapter called The Importance of Kindness and Compassion. So the Buddha Dharma is a method to train our mind that aims at eliminating afflictions, disturbing emotions, and incorrect views. Nirvana is true freedom, the elimination or cessation of these afflictions. Our physical, verbal, and mental efforts directed towards this goal are included in Dharma practice. What is and is not Dharma practice is determined by our motivation. This is really important, because if we want what we do to be Dharma practice, then we need to know what constitutes Dharma practice, what the limits are. So a spiritual motivation must be different from our ordinary wish to seek well-being by way of possessions, money, reputation, and the sweet words of our loved ones. In short, a spiritual motivation must go beyond seeking the happiness of only this life. Okay, there are three levels of Dharma motivation that correspond to the three capacities of practitioners. The first seeks a favorable rebirth, the second aims for liberation from cyclic existence, and the third aspires for full awakening in order to benefit all living beings. Okay, so if we're going to really have a Dharma motivation, and our motivation is the most important determinant of the value of our action, then we need to cultivate one of these three motivations. And right now, do we have any of these three motivations? How many of you think about future life and creating the causes of a good future life before you do things in your daily life? You? When you're mad at somebody, do you think about the effects of, if you're angry and you want to tell somebody off, do you think about the effects of your doing that on your future life? Or do you forget about future lives at that moment when you're angry? It's harder. We try, and we can succeed, and that's really showing progress. But lots of times when a very strong emotion arises, our Dharma practice goes out the window. Okay, so we need this kind of cultivation and repetition so that our mind is really drenched or imbued with the Dharma perspective on life, which means thinking about our future life, thinking about how to be liberated from this cycle of existence, thinking about how to benefit all living beings in the long term, not just helping them in this life, but in the long term. Okay? So as we start practicing the Dharma, our motivation gets challenged, and we're called to really stretch our motivation and look beyond the narrow limitations that we often have. Okay, that's just a little part from there. Maybe I'll read a little bit about what is holiness. Okay, here's from the chapter where he's talking about his own life and how he practices. Okay, so he says, one teaching of the Kadampa masters called the Four Entrustments especially touches my heart. And here's the verse. Entrust your mind to Dharma practice. Entrust your Dharma practice to a life of poverty. Entrust your life of poverty to death, and entrust your death to an empty cave. When we hear this, we go, wait a minute. Yeah, wait a minute. So this is showing really the depth of His Holiness's trust and faith in the Buddhist teachings and his sincerity in how he wants to practice. And although we may not be able to practice in that way right now, we can start taking baby steps to at least understand what that kind of mind that practices in this way could feel like. So just think for a minute. Well, let me read a little bit more, and then we can think about it. So he says, these lines speak of completely giving ourselves to the cultivation of the two bodhicittas, conventional and ultimate, making this the most important activity in our lives, so much so that we are willing to give all of our life's energies to it, from now until our death. That's a tall order, isn't it? To really place the Dharma at the center of our life, now until we die. So although this may, to us seem unfathomable or extreme, when you think about it, it actually inspires us. What is possible for our human mind to do? That we are so intent on awakening that our life's energies are devoted to that. And when our life's energies are geared towards Buddhahood, then the small things in life now that often disturb our mental peace, those things cease to make sense. We don't get upset about them anymore. When your mind is focused on attaining awakening, because you have so much compassion for other living beings, then somebody criticizes you a little bit, you don't take it personally. It's just some small thing of this life. You don't look the way you want to look. Well, that's not so important. Because what are looks anyway? This body comes and it goes. So let's use our body, keep it healthy, keep it clean, use it for Dharma practice. We don't need to worry so much about how we look. So you see, when the mind is reoriented towards a spiritual aim, then so many of the things we worry about now, anxious about now, we just relax about it. Because we realize in the long term, they're small. So he says, relinquishing attachment to the 8 worldly concerns, our mind experiences so much joy and satisfaction with the freedom that Dharma bestows that money and reputation are of no concern to us. So the Dharma brings so much inner peace and satisfaction that we don't care about reputation and money. Wouldn't that be nice? Imagine your life if you didn't care about reputation and money. If you were free of that kind of craving and anxiety, yeah, you could still have reputation and money. You weren't obsessed about it. Yeah. It comes, it goes. Wouldn't that be nice? Yeah, wouldn't that be nice? However much money you had, you just said, that's enough. That's good enough, I can be satisfied with it. Whatever reputation you had, you could just feel, oh, that's good enough too. Some people like me, some people don't like me. It's their choice, it's a free world. I'm not going to cry when people don't like me. Okay, wouldn't it be nice to have that kind of inner freedom? I think it would be great. When I reflect on this verse, tears come to my eyes because this is my highest aspiration. It also reflects the greatest challenge in my life, balancing meditative cultivation with directly benefiting others in this life. Both are aspects of Dharma practice and our inner development. The pressing needs of people right now are very important, but meditative practice beckons, and the need to deepen my own practice in order to benefit others more is also essential. Perhaps some of you live with this tension in your lives. Okay, so that's just a little bit about Volume 1. For those of you who are interested, I'm teaching Volume 1 when I'm back at the Abbey. I teach it on Friday nights, Abbey time, which is Saturday morning, Singapore time. So there's a group of people who meet at Buddhist fellowship, which one? East, yeah, on Saturday morning. Some of the people here do that. You can ask the volunteers in the back of the room. And if you're interested in doing that, they watch the live stream of the teachings on this book, and then they discuss it afterwards. So it's really nice. You get, you're listening to the teachings at the same time as on the Sangha at the Abbey, you're hearing them. And then you get to discuss it with your friends afterwards. Okay, so that's Volume 1. Volume 2 is called The Foundation of Buddhist Practice. So the first part of this volume is also introductory material, but again, it's not easy, it's challenging, but it's really good to be challenged in this way. Okay, and I'll be teaching more on this volume tomorrow and the next day at Amitabha Buddhist Center. Okay, we're doing a retreat based on this text. Okay, so here, His Holiness begins talking about the 4 seals that make something Buddhist practice and the 2 truths, conventional and ultimate truth. So again, what does he do? Starts right on in with the nature of reality. Then he goes on to a chapter called Gaining Non-Deceptive Knowledge. And in here, we investigate the different ways of knowing objects and how can we discriminate and discern what is a reliable consciousness that correctly knows its objects from an unreliable consciousness that is overwhelmed by wrong views or ignorance or some kind of exaggeration or projection. So the beginning of November, I did a 1-week course on this, and we went through chapters 1 and 2 in this, and people loved it. The material, like I said, is challenging, but they were talking about it at lunchtime, at evening meal time, and everybody was really into it. So, quite rewarding. And then we talk about the basis of the self, the body and mind. So how Buddhist philosophers categorize different phenomena. And what are the properties of these different kind of phenomena? So this begins our study into the body and mind. Because what we call I is dependent on a body and a mind. And yet, although we live with our body all the time, we live with our mind all the time, we really don't understand them very well. And we also can't control them very well. We think we can control our body and mind. However, can you prevent yourself from aging? No. Anybody here who did the breathing meditation at the beginning without getting distracted at least one time? No. Okay. So, how do we what is this body and mind, and how do we manage them? How do we subdue them and tame them and direct them into the Dharma? Okay. Then we have 2 chapters that are choosing a spiritual mentors and becoming a qualified disciple, and how to rely on a spiritual mentor. So these chapters are very, very important, because choosing a spiritual mentor and learning how to create a healthy relationship and rely on the instructions of our spiritual mentor, these things are quite important. And there are also some topics that are very much misunderstood. Yeah. At least in my country, these topics are very misunderstood. And as a result, there's been a lot of trouble in different Buddhist centers, because people don't understand what are the qualities of a good spiritual mentor, and how do we relate to our spiritual mentors, and what are the responsibilities of our spiritual mentors, and what are our responsibilities as a Dharma student. Yeah, so these things are not understood well. Then people get very confused. Then we have scandals. Yeah, nobody likes scandals. But if we learn more about this relationship, will prevent a lot of heartache and a lot of scandals. Okay, so there's a couple of chapters on that. Then there's a chapter on how to structure a meditation session. Then we go back into the body, the mind, and rebirth. That topic came in volume 1. In volume 2, we go into it in more depth, because this is an important topic. Yeah, some people nowadays are saying, oh, we're secular Buddhists. We're going to rid Buddhism of all the mythology, all the make-believe. Yeah? And then what they do is they pick and choose different teachings. And whatever doesn't make sense to them, they just kind of leave aside, or they even say the Buddha didn't teach it. So rebirth is one topic like this, because many people do not grow up with the idea of rebirth. So then when they hear about it, they go, I don't know, is it possible, not possible? It seems pretty strange. I like Buddhism, but I don't want to believe in rebirth. So this is a problem, because you can benefit from the Buddhist teachings without believing in rebirth. There's a lot of teachings that you can still learn and practice, and they help you. But if you want to attain higher spiritual realizations, I think understanding rebirth is quite important. Because the alternative, if we don't understand rebirth, is saying that at the end of our lives, we go totally out of existence. Yeah? If at the end of our life, we just cease to exist, then why practice the path to awakening? Yeah? Doesn't make any sense. And so there's a lot of other problems, logical problems that come if we just think at the end of our life there's nothing. So His Holiness is, and we'll go into this tomorrow at ABC, because His Holiness says that rebirth is something that can be proven through logic. Yeah, we don't need to rely on, well, the Buddha said so. But if we really understand what the mind is and we start analyzing, then we can see that rebirth makes a lot of sense. Yeah? But I'm not going to tell you the whole story now because that's for tomorrow morning. I'll leave you in suspense. Okay, then we go into the essence of a meaningful life. Yeah? What does it mean to live a meaningful life? How do we get distracted by worldly concerns that at the moment seem very important, but really in the long run aren't important? And how do we overcome that distraction? Okay, so that comes. Then we talk about looking beyond this life. So here we talk a little bit about life, different life forms, different realms. And we talk about death and how to think about death in a healthy way so that it helps us set our priorities in life, and how to prepare for death and how to help others who are in the process of dying. Okay? Then, after that, we have 1, 2, 3 chapters about karma. Okay? Because when we think about the meaning of our life and that we're going to die, we aren't going to live forever. Yeah, the future life is going to come. That we want to get out of this cycle of existence, then very naturally we start thinking about karma. Because our actions that we do now are going to bring effects that we will experience later. Yeah, so the law of karma and its effects is a law of cause and effect. Okay? So that means our actions have an ethical dimension. When we act, Yeah, we get some results immediately. Yeah, but we also get some long-term results because when we act, our actions leave, for lack of a better word, energy traces. Karmic seeds. We call them karmic seeds or karmic imprints on our mind stream. Yeah. And so, how does that work? How do the karmic seeds go from one life to the next? How do we discern what is a virtuous or wholesome action and what is a non-virtuous and unwholesome action? If we've done, non-virtue, how do we purify it so that we don't have to experience the unpleasant results of our bad actions? So there's, what makes an action heavy? What makes an action light in terms of, bringing a strong result or a weak result? So there's a huge, big discussion in here about karma and different kinds of karma and how it works. Yeah, so very, very important. And so with that, we conclude Volume 2. Volume 3 comes out next month. And it is called Samsara, Nirvana, and Buddha Nature. So it gets really into the nitty-gritty. But these 2 volumes are gradually leading you in that direction and giving you a lot of foundation material so that you'll understand the teachings that are to come. Okay? So we have a few minutes. We can have some questions and comments. If you wish to ask anything or comment on anything you heard.
Thank you, it's incredible. If you have any questions, please raise them. Just raise your hand and we will come around to the microphone to you.
This is your chance to ask questions. Yeah, take the chance.
I wish to ask on the spiritual mentor. Just now you mentioned that you need to rely on a spiritual mentor. But in Theravada tradition, there's less emphasis on spiritual mentor. Whereas in Mahayana tradition, there's more emphasis on that. Can you tell why is there such a differences?
Actually, in the Theravada tradition, there is emphasis on a spiritual mentor. Yeah? When you ordain as a monastic, you have a preceptor. Yeah? That person is your spiritual mentor. They teach you the Vinaya, they teach you the 4 Noble Truths, they teach you the 37 harmonies with awakening. Yeah. So we always have to rely on seniors in our tradition to learn. It isn't that we just, and this applies to lay people as well as monastics. Now we have to learn from other practitioners. We don't just walk in, we can't learn the whole path from a book, because we can't ask a book questions, and a book cannot correct our bad behavior and give us feedback when we mess up. So it doesn't matter really what Buddhist tradition you follow. Learning from learned seniors in the tradition is very important. Because otherwise, we could make up our own path to awakening, couldn't we? we hear a few words here, a few words there, we project meanings on it, we create our own path. Then we wind up in who knows what kind of rebirth in the future. Huh?
So, how is this spiritual mentor different from the guru in the Tibetan tradition?
Okay. What His Holiness does is he talks about different levels of spiritual mentor. And instead of using the word guru or lama, we're using spiritual mentor because I think saying spiritual mentor gives us more of an idea of what the role of that person is. It's somebody who's instructing us, who's mentoring us. Okay? But we still have to practice the path. Sometimes when we hear the word guru, especially if we hear guru devotion, our mind creates this very strange idea. Oh, a guru, this holy being, wow, and I'm so devoted to him. I just grovel at the feet of this enlightened master. You know, just the words guru devotion can give us this kind of emphasis, idea. And that's a wrong idea. That's not what it means, okay? A more accurate translation of the term is relying on a spiritual mentor. Yeah, so a spiritual mentor is somebody who knows more than we do, who has good ethical conduct, who has meditative experience, who knows the scriptures, who has wisdom, who teaches with a compassionate motivation. Yeah? We need to seek out this kind of person and then study under that person's guidance. And you notice that I said study under that person's guidance. I didn't say lie ourselves on the floor and surrender to the guru. Okay? Because some people, have this idea, I surrender to the guru, like I just don't listen to my own wisdom anymore. And that's ridiculous. Yeah. Lama Yeshe, one of my first teachers, he used to say when people treated him this way, oh Lama, what should I do? Should I live here? Should I do that job? What should I do? And he used to say, yes, these people are going to ask me where to go pee-pee. Yeah, they need to use their own wisdom and develop their own wisdom. So that's what the role of a spiritual mentor is. It's not somebody who controls our life. It's somebody who helps us develop our own wisdom, helps us develop compassion for other living beings. Okay? And so this goes for all the different kinds of spiritual mentors that we may have. Okay?
Thanks, Honorable. I have two questions. The first question is regarding the motivations. You mentioned that we can be driven by three motivations: rebirth, or we seek the liberations. But my question is, how about when we do any act or even the kindness and compassion, we do it with an indifference mind, meaning we don't aspire to reach anywhere, but we just do for the sake of doing it, meaning we just feel like we should do it as a human being, but we don't aspire any other more than that.
Okay. So kind of like you're doing it because it seems like a good thing to do, or you're doing it because you want to be kind to the people around you.
Yes, it also makes sense to be kind.
Yes.
Yeah, it doesn't need to have any other reason but just be kind.
Yeah. Okay. If you do an action like that, you also create virtuous karma. Okay? Any kind of kind behavior, honest behavior, any behavior that's opposing the 10 non-virtues is a virtuous action. Okay? The reason that His Holiness was specifying these three motivations is because when we motivate for a specific goal and we dedicate also at the end of the action for that goal, then we are steering that karma so that it will ripen in that way. If we just do an action because it feels good and we want to be kind, it's still virtuous, but it's not quite sure what the long-term effect of the action will be because we didn't think about a long-term effect. Okay. So this is why it's very good in the morning when we wake up to set our motivation for the whole day and think, today, as much as possible, I'm not going to harm others. Today, as much as possible, I'm going to benefit others. And today, I'm going to hold that bodhicitta motivation to attain full awakening for the benefit of others. So you're motivating yourself, at least intellectually, and slowly it will become more and more natural and heartfelt. You're motivating yourself to attain Buddha. And then at the end of the day, you dedicate your merit for that. So you can see having a motivation and a dedication that are in harmony in that way, they're going to be much more powerful than being kind without any particular kind of thought. Okay. Although, like I said, being kind, we do create karma.
Does it mean that by being kind, does a plant the seed for enlightenment? At the same time, when we have less craving, in general, we will not crave for anything, including wanted to be enlightened and wanted to have a good people, because over time that craving actually sort of like depleted, and you will not have that greed to have that attainment anyway. That's a sort of like a connotum of that action.
Okay. Yeah, several people ask that question. Can't we then start craving a better rebirth? Can't we crave liberation? Can't we crave Buddhahood? Okay, we have to understand here what craving and attachment really mean. Okay, and there's a difference between craving and attachment on one hand and a virtuous aspiration on the other hand. Okay, so we can't just say that they're very different, because craving and attachment are based on exaggerating the good qualities of someone or something and then clinging to it, not wanting to let it go. So already you can see that craving and attachment are not realistic mental states. They're based on projection of good qualities, exaggeration of good qualities, and then clinging, I want, this is for me, okay? An aspiration for a good life, for a good future rebirth, for liberation, for awakening. These aspirations are not based on exaggeration and projection, because there are good many benefits to a good future rebirth. Attaining liberation is a wonderful aim to have. There's no exaggeration involved. Seeking Buddhahood, we're not exaggerating the good qualities of Buddhahood. They exist. Okay? So we have that virtuous aspiration. Yeah? And that is entirely different than attachment and craving. Okay? So this is very important to understand. Otherwise, if we don't understand it, then we think any time we want anything, that is non-virtuous and it's attachment and it's craving and it needs to be abandoned. If we think like that, then our ideal of a Buddhist practitioner becomes somebody who's a bump on a log and doesn't do anything. I have no attachment. I have no craving. Do what you do. Let what happens happen. I don't care. Yeah. Does the Buddha look like somebody who looks at life that way? No. The Buddha cares a lot. The Buddha is active in benefiting sentient beings. Buddha's not a bump on a log like, oh, I have no attachment, I don't care. Okay?
Thanks, Honorable. The second question is regarding how to handle the current world conflict. For example, like say Donald Trump, the president, started on this trade war. And when he started on this trade war, it actually affected a lot of people's life and how we actually engage each other, meaning they create of hatred and the country started to have conflict, all the leaders start to have this mentality of fighting each other. So how we as a Dharma practitioner to also protect ourselves, guard ourselves from all these harmful cause and effect.
And the influences
Correct.
of those around us.
And sometimes we could not help being dragged into this vortex of this conflict because we have no choice because they are taking the world norm away.
Okay, so this is a time when it's especially important to make our minds very clear and very firm. So very clear, we have to really see what are the causes of happiness and what are the causes of suffering. What is virtue? What is non-virtue? We need to study these things and then study our mind and transform our mind so that we are creating virtue and abandoning non-virtue. It doesn't matter what the rest of society does. We have to be clear about the path we want to follow. Everybody else can criticize us, they can think we're crazy. That doesn't matter. We have to stay our course because it's a course that we've examined with reason, and it's a course that leads to the good for humanity and for other living beings. So we need the clarity to discern that, and then we need to remain firm in that direction. Okay? We can't just say, well, everybody else criticizes people, so I will too. Donald Trump just, tweets criticism at 3 o'clock in the morning, and he doesn't care whose feelings he hurts. So I'm going to do that too. That is foolishness, isn't it? That's stupidity. Yeah. If a leader is behaving poorly, we don't copy their bad behavior. Yeah. We look at people who have good behavior and good motivations. We copy their example. And I think now is especially the time where we have to be very strong in this regard. We can't be lazy and just kind of say, well, there's so many advanced practitioners, I'll kind of rely on them and they'll lead the way. No, we have to, put our feet on the path and follow it.
Good evening, Venerable. So I'm just wondering about using thoughts, logic, and reasoning to understand the teachings. Because for me, I'm a person who likes to understand and read the Dharma and listen to Dharma. And I'm just looking at it from the perspective that at some point in time, there's only so far that logic and reasoning can bring us, correct? Because it still comes from concepts. So at a certain point, I've got to let go of all that reading and listening and just kind of transcend. So can you speak a bit about this point?
Okay, so the Buddha talks about three kinds of wisdom. The wisdom from learning or studying, hearing teachings, the wisdom of reflection and thinking about the teachings, and then the wisdom of meditation. Okay. And lots of people want to jump to meditation, thinking, I want to have non-conceptual realization of nirvana and emptiness. But they have no idea what those things are. We have to start out with a conceptual understanding and use logic and reasoning to make sure our understanding is correct. Then we need to think about what we have learned to really make sure that we have the correct view. Then we really meditate and integrate it with our being. And in the meditation phase, that's when we go beyond concept. Okay? Now, in terms of understanding selflessness or emptiness, we need to, first understand what they mean. If we don't understand what they mean and how to prove that they exist, then how in the world are we going to meditate on them? Then we'll just invent our own idea of what selfless means and our own idea of emptiness. Yeah, emptiness means no thought. Yeah. Or emptiness is like, the refrigerator being empty. No, that's not what emptiness means. Okay? So we have to really understand what it is. And then, with an analytical mind, start gaining insight. And so at first, our insight into emptiness and selflessness is based on inference. It's a conceptual mind. But because it's based, really on reasoning, just that realization is very powerful to change how we look at things. Then, as we meditate on that understanding, the conceptual part of it fades away, and we're able to realize emptiness and selflessness directly. Okay? So it's a process. And we can't skip from 0 to 100. Yeah. We have to go through all the different stages. If not in this life, Maybe we did some in a previous life, we'll do some in a future life. Okay, so one more question.
Honorable, just want to ask a question on rebirth. You say that if without understanding the concept or totally appreciate the concept of rebirth, it's quite hard to proceed on the path. Just trying to understand what you mean by that. Give example. Let's say when we analyze our mind, we understand that our mind coming from some cause and relation that we have actually construct all consciousness and emotion based on whatever experience. So, hypothetically speaking, we can actually interpret logically there should be a previous thought prior to that. That is sort of like a bit of logical understanding and maybe some meditative experience. Another dimension is, hypothetically speaking, if you meditate enough, some of the practitioners actually can really see their past life in one form or another. Again, that could be a mental construction or make-believe kind of situation, depends on the clarity of that reflection. Both of these can only extend so much of that belief of faith. At the end of the day, it's quite hard to convince ourselves that rebirth is truly there. So I try to understand, because without understanding this, it's a bit difficult to liberate, because it's not like cornerstone of the discussion.
So, like I said, I'm not going to go into the whole reasoning about rebirth tonight. Come tomorrow, okay? Yeah? Because otherwise, we'll be here quite long tonight, and then tomorrow, what do I say? Okay, so it requires, when I talk about using reasoning and so on, it's not just that we think about something once and it makes sense and that's it. We think about something and we reflect on it again, then we analyze it some more, we look at it from this angle, from that angle, from this perspective, and really using the capabilities of our mind, then looking at things from many perspectives, then some conviction comes. Okay, so it's not just, I think about it once and I understand perfectly. No. Okay? Yeah. I mean, even, if you learn science, even learning about the theory of atoms, that takes a while to understand, doesn't it? And do we really know that the theory of atoms is actually correct the way it's being described? Because the way I learned about atoms when I was in school is not the way they're teaching atoms now. Okay? So the previous understanding was, what we knew then we gained more information, slowly our understanding improves. So we can see that with, science, and our understanding of Buddhist things too improves as we think about things over time, as we have life experience, because very often we'll think about something, but then something in our life will happen, and what we've thought about in the Dharma perfectly describes what we've just experienced, and we'll go, I get it. Yeah? Okay.
Any final questions for them?
So this will be the last question.
Thank you, Venerable. So my question is this: one of the main reasons we do Buddhism is to eliminate sufferings by eradicating the defilements. But in the process of our practice, by reason of our practice of Buddhism, sometimes we encounter certain suffering because of our practice. Can I put it in a way to say that we are sort of suffering on a short-term basis so that we can eliminate the long-term suffering? And how do we not get discouraged by this kind of situation?
Are you thinking of a particular example?
For example, if we are, let's say, one of the 6 perfections when we practice, if, just for example, we practice some patience and joyous perseverance, while practicing virtues, we have to undergo certain, perhaps poverty and perhaps giving up certain things, and we feel certain kind of suffering. So, short-term suffering.
Okay. Yeah. That comes actually in the foundation of Buddhist practice, doesn't it? Didn't we talk about that during the course? The Buddha talked about it, yeah? And he says, if something produces short-term suffering and long-term suffering, don't do it. If something produces short-term good and long-term good, do it. Now, so those two are pretty clear. It's the 2 things in between. If something produces short-term happiness, but long-term suffering, do you do it or not do it? From a Buddhist perspective, we don't do it, because the short-term suffering doesn't last very long. The long-term suffering could last a long time. If something brings short-term suffering, but long-term benefit, then we do it. Because the short-term suffering is short compared to the long-term benefit. Yeah? So when you have this kind of perspective, then even you face some difficulties in your practice, you don't, they don't overcome you, because you know that you're going for the long-term good. And you know there's a little bit of suffering now, but it's going to bring the long-term good. So you go for it. It's like you go to the doctor, you're sick. The doctor's treatment doesn't always feel good, but you undergo it because you know in the future it'll make you healthy. Okay? So we don't just make ourselves, we build some fortitude. We build some ability inside of ourselves to handle suffering. And as we increase that fortitude, then handling the suffering becomes much easier, and we don't suffer as much.